Okay, this demo is a Photoshop compositing demo, and we're going to construct an image that I call the Dreamers. I'm showing you this image here in Lightroom. It's complete. You'll see that I have these two figures, one in the foreground, one in the background. They are the same model, of course, as you see. There's a moon in the sky up in the upper right area. These were all photographed separately. I initially photographed the basic scene, which is under the L tracks in Chicago in an alleyway. I later on decided I wanted to photograph a model and see if I could composite her believably into the scene. And so I looked at that overall background, which I'll show you here, and I studied the light, the color of the light, the direction of the light. You'll see that there's an orange light on the left and a more cool whitish light on the right-hand side. So when I photographed the model in the studio, I photographed her against a plain background, and I lit her in a similar way with a light to the left that had an orange gel and a light to the right that had a slightly blue gel. I photographed her against a white backdrop, which I wish in retrospect that I had lit on its own, but it's plain enough that I think her contours will be visible and we'll be able to composite her just fine. I'm going to start by opening up the background image, and I'm going to open it from Lightroom, but you could just as well drag the image into Photoshop if you have my folder of demo files. So I'm going to go to the photo menu, edit in, and I'm going to choose open a smart object in Photoshop. And now that image is open in Photoshop, I'm going to go back to Lightroom, and I'm going to open up this image, which I call standing model. So photo, edit in, open as smart object. If you simply drag the images into Photoshop, they won't be smart objects, but that's not all that important for this demo. So here is standing model. What I'm now going to do is drag this image into the other image, or cut, copy, and paste, however you want to do it. I'm going to simply go to Window, Arrange, tile all these images vertically. Now I can see both images at once. I'm going to grab my Move tool, and I'm going to come down to the base layer, the image layer of this image, which in my case is a smart object, and I'm going to drag that layer from one onto the other. Doesn't seem to be moving. Let's try that again. There it goes. And I'm going to hold down the Shift key when I let it go on the other image. Now I'm going to touch the tab or click on the tab of the other image, my background image, and go to Window, Arrange, and consolidate all of these to tabs, so I'm only looking at one image. So I have this layer on top of the background. The first thing I'm going to want to do here is to move this layer a little bit. You're going to see that the bottom of the image, I want it to line up perfectly with the bottom of the background. And the next thing I'm going to do is select this figure so that I can mask away the background. To do this, I really believe in moving the full image onto my background first, and then selecting and masking, rather than cutting out just the part that I want and moving it onto the background. It'll give me more options later if I want it. So I'm going to go to the quick selection tool first. That's right here. Turn on that tool. Now I'm going to go to the figure, and this is essentially a brush. I want the brush size to be not too big and not too small. Now I'm going to show you that's too big. I would end up painting over the edge of the figure. What's too small? That would be too small. It would take me a long time to get around to all the little nooks and crannies. But somewhere maybe around that big should be good enough. I use the right and left bracket keys to resize my brush. And what you want to do here is click and drag and occasionally let go and start again. Click and drag and stay well within the boundaries of the thing you're selecting, the figure in this case. If you go out to the edge of the figure, or certainly if you go past the edge of the figure, you're going to end up selecting a lot of the background. You don't want that. You'll notice that I'm occasionally letting go and starting again and adding to my selection as I go. This tool is automatically in the Add to Selection mode. And by occasionally letting go and starting again, That means that if I ever do go too far, I can probably just undo one little step as opposed to having to do the whole thing over again. Now I've got mostly the figure selected, just about. There's going to be a few little areas, and I'll zoom in and show you here. There's going to be a few little polka dots around the edge of this figure on her top that didn't get quite selected, and so here's where I'm going to move to a much smaller brush size of this tool and go grab those little extra bits that didn't get quite fully selected. And I'm going to go around. By the way, this little flyaway section of the hair, don't worry about that. We're going to take care of that in another step. But I'm looking for little areas that maybe didn't get fully selected. Again, particularly these little polka dots on the edge. Some of them are so small that you'd never miss them, but I don't want it to seem like she has a bite taken out of her shoulder or some kind of notch cut into it. So that looks about right. Zoom back out, Command 0 to zoom back out to fill the frame. And now I'm going to refine this selection. When I have a selection active like this and a selection tool active, you'll notice that in the options bar, there is an area for select and mask. There's a button up here, if I can get back to it. Select and mask button. Now I'm going to click that, and it's going to take me into a different workspace. This is a workspace where I can refine the mask or the selection that I have. If we look over here on the right hand side near the top, there's something called View. Right now we're looking at this in the onion skin view, which means that the areas that are not selected are kind of translucent. They're sort of less than fully opaque. I usually like to work with my view as set to on layers. When I click on layers, you'll see that all of that area that I didn't select disappears for the moment. Now I say for the moment because this is just a preview. If we scroll down a little bit here, or look down a little bit, there are these areas called global refinements. The first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to this area that says Shift Edge, and I'm going to move this to a negative amount, and that's going to shrink the selection inward slightly. The next thing I'll do is go to Feather and up that by maybe half a pixel or so. That's just going to give a very slight softening edge to my selection, but you don't want to go too far, and I'll show you what it looks like when you do go too far. If you look at the model now, she has kind of a blurry edge, and that doesn't look real. So we don't want to go very much, maybe half a pixel or so. Now I'm going to go up to this area called Edge Detection and turn on Smart Radius. You zoom back out and show you something else about this workspace. If we now look into the upper left-hand corner of the workspace, there's a few different tools, and the second one down is called the Refine Edge Brush Tool. I'm going to turn that on, and now I'm working essentially with a brush, and I'm going to change the size, maybe to about that big, and this is going to allow me to go over any areas that seem like they're not quite well selected. And don't ask me how this works, it's some Photoshop algorithmic magic here, but if you brush over those areas, like where the flyaways are, Photoshop looks for your edge based on a radius and does some smart stuff and figures out where the edge of that is, and you get a much better edge detection, much better edge refinement now. All right, looking pretty good. I'm going to drop back out, Command 0, and pull back a little bit so you guys can see the whole workspace. At this point, my selection is refined. I'm ready to go. What I'm now going to do, you know what? I'm going to get in here and hit this shoulder because I see a little bit of a glowing edge to that shoulder. So I'm going to go along with a very small brush. Not bad, but I might take my shift edge just a little bit lower. All right, pretty good. So I'm going to pull back, and I'm going to click OK. And then we're all going to be very disappointed because all of that stuff comes back because it was just a preview we were looking at a second ago. Now we see the background again, but our selection has been refined, and what we can now do is click on our Add Layer Mask button down here, click that, and now it adds the layer mask how we had selected, and our model is masked. And the only thing left to do now is to scale her a little bit. I want to make her a little bit smaller and move her into a different position. And I'm going to do that by going to the Edit menu in Photoshop, down to Transform and Scale. You'll see now that there's a bounding box around the total image element, even the part that we can't see. And we're going to grab a corner here and drag it inward. It should stay in scale. If for some reason when you drag it, it doesn't stay in scale, if the proportions change, then try holding down the Shift key. I can also move her as I do this. I'm going to drag her over, maybe scale down a little bit. I kind of like to have her head here where these two lines intersect, sort of as leading lines drawing you into that face. Once you've got her scaled correctly and in position, you can finish the scale by hitting the Enter key or double clicking inside the bounding box. Either one will do. I hit the Return key, Enter key, same thing, and that transformation is complete. And we'll do the rest in the next video.